So, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to take your seats, we're going to begin the next panel session of the day when we're going to be talking about realizing the enormous potential for green ammonia. I think this is a great segue from the previous panel. I was fascinated to hear some of the issues being discussed and fascinated to hear the point in particular about the importance of shale gas coming from the United States as a contributor to India's energy supply. I'm based in the US, and that's a country where I have to say there's been quite a lot of negative sentiment around green hydrogen, the green hydrogen value chain, including green ammonia recently, much more focus on blue. And so it's been really fascinating to come here, to come to India, to see a much more positive and optimistic mood about the green hydrogen value chain. And I think well-founded optimism. And I think, as the title of this panel says, there is enormous potential here, but clearly there are still quite a few steps that need to be taken to realize that potential and to make sure that the growth that we can see in the future of the green ammonia industry can be realized. Got a fantastic panel here, 6 of the leading figures in the field from various different perspectives, including developers, operating companies, technology suppliers, and so on. So it's going to be really great to hear all of their different perspectives in the course of the day, in the course of this session. I mean, I wonder if I can start, sorry, we're not going to be talking all day, but I'm sure we could. So, Ranjit Gupta, you're the founder and CEO of Ocior Energy, which is a specialist in the green hydrogen value chain and also operating in green ammonia. What is your sense of this central question then? When you think about what needs to happen to make sure that green ammonia can realize its potential, what is your answer?
Thanks, thanks for the question. And this is the question that I've been asking myself for the last 2.5 years since I started on this journey. So I think as far as whether it is green ammonia or green hydrogen is concerned, I feel that the two challenges that we face, the first challenge is the offtake, right? And unless and until there is an offtake, there is no real business model for business to move forward, because if you don't have offtake, you don't have financing. If you don't have financing, then you don't have a project, and if you don't have a project, you don't have the molecule. So I think offtake has been a little bit of a letdown over the last couple of years. There has been a lot of talk about various parts of the world coming up with offtake contracts, but that hasn't happened at the scale or speed at which we had hoped it would happen. And I think the second thing is the green ammonia, green hydrogen industry has not done a very good job at bringing forth what green ammonia and green hydrogen should be used for. Unfortunately, whenever we talk about green hydrogen, green ammonia, we end up talking about edge use cases like mobility or green steel, green aluminum, and green cement, etc., forgetting that currently almost 100 million tons of hydrogen is used, and that is the low-hanging fruit. That needs to be replaced first, and it's not a molecule, whether it is ammonia or hydrogen, which is required only when there is a new use case for it in the market, right? And mobility will happen, it will happen in its own good time. Green steel will happen, and green fertilizer will happen, and shipping will happen, and all of those good stuffs will happen. But at the moment itself, there is 200 million tons of ammonia, almost 100 million tons of hydrogen, which are used worldwide in industry, which needs to be replaced slowly and surely by the green molecule. And the green molecule on the edge cases, right, the difference between, especially in countries like India, the difference between green and gray is barely 20, 30, 40%. It's not several times higher. And the narrative which has been built has unfortunately been left in the hands of the people who have money, like the oil and gas companies, which results in, when they talk about the cost of green hydrogen, green ammonia, they talk of the highest cost, which is, say, for example, in continental Europe. And when they talk about the price of gray hydrogen and gray ammonia, they talk about the lowest cost, let's say, in continental US. So therefore, the gap that seems to be in front of you is something where gas is at $3, right? And where solar and wind is at 20 cents. And therefore, the difference between green and gray seems very, very huge. Whereas that is not the reality. And I think as an industry, we have sort of failed in making that narrative, for ourselves.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Thank you. Gautam Reddy, CEO of Green Ammonia, again, important player specializing in this industry. What's your sense of this? What needs to happen to realize the potential of the industry?
No, Ranjit summarized it, but I'll just add, right, just little more detail on that. So after the 100 million tons Ranjit was talking about current hydrogen usage, 50 million tons is used in refinery for cleaning crude. Now, there are studies across the world that if this is adopted to green hydrogen, then the end user at the petrol station, gas station pays between 1 to 3% extra for 100% conversion. So for, again, like an industry, I don't know why we are not able to convince lawmakers and why there's so much talk about climate change, but such a small step. I'm sure no one really minds paying 1 to 3% extra at the petrol station to create a 50 million ton industry. So I think same thing, the offtakes, the demand creation, there's a lot of talk and very little action. I think that's been a problem. Also, there's everyone trying to do different things. That's another problem, right? You, like I was hearing someone putting this very nicely yesterday, right? You know, it took 25 years for the seaport to become a standard charger platform, right? Green hydrogen has South Korean standard, Japanese standard, Indian standard, European standard. That's completely, I would say, causing a further impediment to offtakes happening. So this has to change. I think there has to be a single global standard. And once the single global standard comes, what can easily follow is a transfer of credits. Because it's very clear today that there are certain producing nations which will do green hydrogen cost effectively. Those countries are typically large landmass countries with good renewables and a big demand population as well. It's just not enough to have because renewables is a very highly capex intensive business. You always need a backup plan for the renewables. You can't just depend on hydrogen. So countries like India, China, Brazil, US will be the ones producing this most cost effectively. Demand centers are South Korea, Japan, Singapore, Europe, a big demand center. It's just inefficient to actually make this hydrogen and then move this across. That should not be the case. All these countries also consume a lot of hydrogen, and then we should be able to move these standardized credits across. So I think that, while we talk of demand, if the governments can solve for some of these, then you will not be spending money in moving this hydrogen from these low-cost producing countries, and that will kickstart further demand. So some of these things have to happen.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Thank you. And I want to dig into that question of demand and offtake a bit later on. Before we do that, though, Sébastien, Roussel, I wanted to bring you in. You're the Chief Operating Officer at Rely, which is technology and EPC contractor. Perhaps for the benefit of people who may not know Rely, a fairly new company, you could talk a little bit about the company and what you do. And also, as I say, I'm interested in your thoughts on this question of what the industry needs to achieve to be successful.
Yeah, thank you. So Relay, as you mentioned, is a brand new company, 40 months old. And so this is the result of a joint venture between Technip Energy and John Cockerill, both global technology and solution provider. And Relay has been created to address to the market with an offer with the full, I would say, hydrogen and power to X ecosystem. With the full panel of technology solutions and services. And long story short, I would say this is driven by this need to lower the LCOH for our customers. So coming back on your question about these challenges, I would say in our domain, I see two main challenges. The very first one is about the technology. Our customers, they need to get access to a matured technology. Today, the technology exists, it's pretty well advanced, but there's still a lot of room for performance increase and getting technology reliable, particularly when we see what's going to happen upstream with the power grid, because renewable doesn't mean regular, so we need to be able to digest these variations, and downstream this ability to integrate the molecular production. So in terms of technology, that's why, and that's particularly why Relay developed this technology center, just to make sure that innovation is fully aligned with the ambition behind of this technology needs and evolution. So this is the first one, the technology. Second one is more about, and it was already rightly introduced by Gautam, is the CapEx. We need to lower the CapEx to make it affordable for the customer. And this is where we have a lot of paths to improve, and I guess we will come back on it. And down the river, I would say, when the project is done, it's important to have this OpEx under control. The power, of course, needs to be secure. I think in line with the offtake, but also mitigate the risk with regard to the CO2 emissions and being compliant with the regulations. But further, it's nice to give the key to the customer, but I think customers and green ammonia business, they need comfort when they take their decisions, and they need to be accompanied also during this, I would say, the long-term maintainability. And there are still some open questions with the long-term maintainability. This is where we have to act and accompany the customer and give them the comfort and mitigate the risk, particularly the day they will go in front of the lender. And we want to be single point of contact for that, and to provide with wrap-up performance for the full turnkey.
Right, that's very interesting, thank you. Yeah. So, John van der Velden, wonder if I could bring you in on this same question. You're the SVP for technology at Linde Group, obviously a very well-established supplier of technology to the energy industry for many years. What do you see as the crucial issues for you in terms of driving the process, driving the progress of the green ammonia industry and making the industry a success?
Yes, no, thank you so much for these questions, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here. I mean, for us as Linde, being the largest industrial gases company and having a big stake into the hydrogen supply today, gray as you like, for us it was, of course, not a question but a must to be part of the energy transition, to make sure that we do not only decarbonize our own assets but also going forward. And as technology, providing that not only to the Linde Group but also to our partners in the industry. And as hydrogen no longer is just an industrial gas to support our industries but becomes an energy carrier, of course there's much more excitement and interest from the market to see who can play which role into this industry. And when we looked a few years back, when this whole transition started, we thought, okay, it will all start with smaller green projects subsidized of a few megawatts, but to our surprise, the request came up for gigawatts in the most remote locations. And some of that excitement has gone out of the market because actually the maturity of the electrolyzers was not at a stage that you could build at that scale. And actually, now looking back a few years later, you do see that there are smaller opportunities growing and growing. It started with a 10 megawatt here, and we've been running electrolyzers for decades in China already, small capacities. And now you see that we're overcoming these technological challenges in terms of performance over stack, the degradation, the cost, as you mentioned, to bring that down. But at the same time, we see that there's, of course, competition in the globe related to low carbon hydrogen, and call it blue as you like. And your question came from how do you look at the US versus India? In the US, we've seen that the 45Q was actually fueling a lot of interest for larger projects, where we have one project currently under construction for OCI, now becoming Woodside, to supply low carbon hydrogen into their ammonia facility, which they are producing, and that's meant to be for exports. So that's large, but us feeding into direct an ammonia plant. Also, we announced to work for Dow in Alberta to supply the ethane cracker, an existing one and a new one, with low carbon hydrogen. This is available at scale. I mean, if you would translate that to electrolyzer capacity, what we're producing with an ATR-based solution in Alberta, that would be 3 to 4 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity. I mean, that's beyond scale of what we can imagine what we could do at the moment in terms of electrolysis. So yes, at the moment we are building green hydrogen production capacity in Europe for the oil majors, energy majors, Shell, RWE, Yara as an ammonia producer. So one installation in Norway where we're having hydropower running at stable, at full capacity night and day is of benefit to the electrolyzer. Those opportunities we see. And then the question is, where does that leave India? Of course, the offtake from either Asia or Europe is very important. But with the cost of renewable power you have, and that being 75% of the cost of an electrolyzer plant, I mean, of course, the cost of your renewable power will allow you to be competitive. And this is something which is an opportunity for India. For the same token, Europe is not so excited about low carbon hydrogen, so it's going to be green. And then with your low cost of production here in the country, I think that's a great opportunity for India to grasp that opportunity, not only in Asia, but also in Europe. So there's technological challenges still ahead of us. I mean, we talk about intermittence. I mean, the solar is only there for 8 hours during the day. Do we use batteries? Do we use another backups? Because these electrolyzers to be turned on and off is not, the greatest match to what they technically can do. Degradation is something we're still testing. And for the same token, the whole energy vector, what does it mean? Are we ready to go fully ammonia exports? And do we need to convert that back to hydrogen in the end user markets? It's a lot of these questions we still need to answer. And I think in terms of converting back, we are developing technology together with Aramco of converting ammonia back to hydrogen in the end user markets to not only allow ammonia users directly, but also to convert it back to hydrogen and go to mobility or the other outlets we've just mentioned. So I think all in one, there's still technological challenges in terms of green, in terms of scaling compared to low carbon hydrogen, but regulatory-wise there are opportunities and your cost of renewable power is attractive. And I think that's an opportunity which India should take going forward.
Thanks very much indeed. Bharat, Goenka, I wonder if I could get you to pick up on exactly that theme about opportunities in India and what the Indian government is doing in terms of supporting the industry and the potential that exists here. You're the regional vice president for NextChem, which obviously a large group in other areas, but now looking at green ammonia as an area for expansion. Again, same point to you, given the potential that exists in India, what needs to happen to realize it?
Thank you, Edmund, for your question. I'll start with a very basic response that if we divide the industry from the perspective, is there enough renewable energy on the planet? Yes, there is enough renewable energy. Is there enough demand for the energy? Yes, there is enough demand. So probably the only thing we are talking about is how to store the energy and transport the energy to make it reach the end users. So from those perspective, I would say that if we look at Indian government's initiatives, everybody probably in this room knows very well that the government has come up with very strong subsidies through SECI, almost $2 billion US, which are being, distributed in a way to make the projects effective. Yes, it doesn't bridge the gap, but it makes a baby step towards feasibility of the projects. But coming back to these points, of course, like John just mentioned, there are multiple technological challenges and economical challenges, because in the end, the product and the project has to become economically viable. In the end, the money has to go from the end user's pocket, and if we make it as cost effective as possible, that's what is going to play a very critical process in the whole thing. And one thing which makes the whole thing little bit uncertain is about different country policies, because there is no global policy as such, or there is no global platform by which you will say this is the green hydrogen, this hydrogen has come after emitting X percentage of CO2, and this is at this level of color, and you can get this price benefit out of it. So there is no clear benchmarking right now, and which makes investors and buyers hesitant to make long-term contracts. And for investing into a high capex of multi-billion, people are looking for long-term contracts. So I feel that's one gap which is there and which can be plugged once the policies across the governments become a little uniform, and they bring kind of focus around enabling the investment in the market. The second part, again, comes back on the technology part, where something I would say we as a company, we are working very strongly from the perspective of building robust configurations. Because one thing which is there is that individual component. We talk about battery, we talk about hydrogen storage, we talk about ammonia technologies, but then how do we integrate them in terms of optimizing CAPEX versus OPEX? Because the market is very sensitive on CAPEX right now, but OPEX is also going to play a major role in the end, and that's something which you can say as a tool which we have developed. We focus on developing robust configurations to optimize those costs. So those are, few factors I'll put around which will play a very critical role in coming times also, not immediately, but also in coming times.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. And certainly we want to drill into that question of costs in a moment. Before I do, Anil Kumar Taparia, the Chief Operating Officer for Green Hydrogen and Ammonia at ACME Group. I was wondering if we could broaden the perspective out from India a little bit and think globally. You're currently developing a project in Oman. I'm interested in your thinking about different locations for green ammonia production around the world, the relative attractiveness of different locations. When you're thinking about where you want to develop projects, where you want to allocate capital, what are the crucial factors that shape those decisions?
Thank you for the question, and good afternoon to all. Before I take your question, I just wanted to highlight some of the requisite of why green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, or gray hydrogen we are talking on. There are decarbonization requirement. There are the requirement of looking for the alternative fuel, and there are the requirement of geopolitical independency on those countries which are fully dependent on fossil fuel from some of the countries which sometimes play a crucial role in the economy of the country. So these are the three parameters on which we talk about the alternative fuel, which is green hydrogen. As far as the green ammonia is concerned, it is for the time being, because the green ammonia utilization, the energy is by the green hydrogen, whether it is in the refinery, whether it is in the automotive industry, or in the industrial heavy application use, the use is for the green hydrogen. Green ammonia is the carrier at the moment, because this alternative fuel is going for the innovation. When we look back around 15 years ago, we were trying for alternative energy sources, which was renewable energy. The differential between the conventional energy and the renewable energy at that time was almost many-fold, 3-folds of what was the rate for the conventional energy. Over the period, 10 years and so, today we are much more comparable to the conventional energy, and the world has found some good sources of energy. Similar thing will happen for the green hydrogen in future. Next 10 years, it will happen like that. When people talk about green hydrogen as comparable or economical and competitive as the fossil fuel-based energy source of hydrogen. Coming back to the question about why we have chosen Oman as a place, just to brief you, we are building a plant in Oman, 100,000 tons of per annum capacity for green ammonia, which we have tied up for 25 years long tenure contract with a European company. And when we were scouting for a good location where we had to put the hydrogen plant, green ammonia plant, the 60 to 70% of the cost of green hydrogen and ammonia is on the renewable. So we have to necessarily go to a place which has very good capacity to produce the most economical renewable source. So Oman is one of the place which is having a good GHI as compared to Indian and the other sides. So Oman, Jordan, Egypt, and India, we were looking for some place, and we are happy that Oman is having a very good source of solar energy as well as the wind energy where we are putting up the plant. So that was the one reason why, technical reason why we have chosen Oman. Then Oman is our friendly country. We have very good government support in Oman. And third reason is Oman is well connected to the European market where the demand of green molecule is there. That was the reason why we have chosen Oman. The other reasons are Oman is a good place to put up the plants. We don't have the geopolitical uncertainty for longer duration. And that is the place which is, that is the government support by Indian government as well as the Oman government is very supportive of this innovative idea of looking for the green, looking for the alternate energy.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Ranjit, I wonder if I could ask you that same question then. So you also have projects at Ocior in Egypt, I think, in Jordan, in Abu Dhabi, as well as in India. How do you think about the balance of sort of the relative attractiveness of those various different locations for investment and how you make your decisions on capital allocation?
So Ed, when we started our journey a couple of years back, right, at that time the market that seemed to be the most promising as far as offtake is concerned seemed to be Europe. And therefore when we started our journey, we started looking at the MENA region, all the way from Namibia, which is not really MENA, all the way to Abu Dhabi, to see which are the locations where it would make sense to set up a project. And we focused on Egypt after that search because Egypt had a very good policy to support green hydrogen, green ammonia production. They had allocated an area for the chemical facility. They had allocated land for wind and solar, and they had come up with a framework of rules and regulations to provide benefits and incentives to companies that came up and set up green molecule projects. And Egypt, being close to Europe, made perfect sense for us to set up in Egypt. So that's where we set up our first development in Egypt. And then as we looked further, we looked at Jordan. Jordan is also fairly well placed. The resource is lower in Jordan. Jordan doesn't have a very defined framework at the moment. So therefore, that's a project that's going to happen in some time. It's not something that is imminent right away because they're still working on developing a framework to support green molecule projects in Jordan. So we are still some distance away. Abu Dhabi was a very strange experience because Abu Dhabi has immense potential. Though it doesn't have any wind, which is a bit of a bummer, but Abu Dhabi has gas, right? And therefore, given the fact that gas is easy to switch on and off, really banking solar on the grid would have been a very easy thing to do in Abu Dhabi. However, I think when we got to Abu Dhabi a little bit early, and Abu Dhabi had still not made up their mind whether they want to do green or they want to do blue, and how this industry is going to affect oil and gas. So we didn't make too much headway in Abu Dhabi. So we are still there, but I think we are waiting on a coherent policy. And also, Abu Dhabi has very strong companies like Masdar and ADNOC and so on. So therefore, how much of their business will go to companies outside of these large conglomerates is something to be seen so far. The India project we looked at was purely because once we saw that Europe was slow, right, at that point in time, we saw that Singapore, Japan, and Korea were coming up as other centers where demand was going to pick up, where they were coming up with policies which would enable companies in these countries to offtake the green molecule. And we figured that given the renewable energy availability of good resource, and policies of the government regulations framework in India, which supported export of green molecule, we figured that on the East Coast we could do a project.
Right, sorry to interrupt. So I'm coming to the question then, which I think is really important, and I would like everyone to pitch in on really, which is the question of, you raised it before, offtake and where the demand is. You were talking about Europe sort of in the past tense as saying, it seemed that Europe was where the most attractive market was. Do you think that's no longer the case, and is in fact more of the demand going to be maybe domestically in India, or what's your view on that? And I'm interested to get other panelists' perspective on that as well, but Ranjit, do you want to give your answer first?
I think Europe will develop into a good market. I think, for example, Gautam's company, COO-Green, they have contracts in Europe. ACME has a contract in Europe. So therefore, Europe will definitely be a very, very important market. I think in the very near term, in the very short term, which we are looking at, like say the next year or the next to next year or the next to next year, I think India and the East might have better offtake opportunities.
Yeah, thank you. Gautam, what do you think? Where is the market?
I think we need to be a little patient, right? I think what happened in 2022-23 was this whole Russian gas issue in Europe created an irrational exuberance around hydrogen demand, right? And in 2024, that hype has died down. You see, we've been through this journey in solar, wind, and so on and so forth. To expect a 100 million ton demand to happen in 2 years, if you step back and think, we were never convinced that it's going to happen so quickly. Just because gas was at $55, I think everyone started talking about this in Europe, but this was never our viewpoint, right? So I think this is slow but sure transition, and it'll happen at its pace. Might not happen in 2-3 years. It'll take 10-12 years. But the demand in Europe is absolutely definite. If you look at European laws today, of course, everyone has to adopt the European Renewable Energy Directive to their own countries. But one law that no one is disputing there and everyone is accepting is 1% of the fuel at the station should become RFNBO. Now that demands, there's no other way to do that other than completely convert their hydrogen in refineries 100, because the rough math is 1% by weight of crude, you need hydrogen to clean the crude, right? So they need to go 100% hydrogen there, right? So that no one is disputing. If you read all the policy narratives around it, that is happening, and that's happening in 2030. So that itself will create, Europe consumes around 4.5 million tons of hydrogen in refineries. And European hydrogen is expensive. If European hydrogen is expensive, it all has to come through ammonia coming back and cracking. So 4.5 million tons roughly is 30 million tons of ammonia has to come to Europe to be able to cater to this demand in refineries, right? So this is happening. I think it will happen in a more slow but sure-footed way. The regulations, of course, are difficult. Now, India is a very different case. It's an in situ case. You all heard the Honorable Minister speak the other day. There are 2 or 3 tenders going on in India today. Small volumes, I would say, by the general expectations, but they will set some very clear data points. Now, I've been in Indian oil and gas for 20 years. See, we have a little slow way of doing things in India because a lot of thought goes into it. And once it's set though, it will just explode, right? And we have seen this in many industries in India. You go across any industry, they will ensure a right price is discovered first, right? That's the policymakers here, right? They're very price conscious. They will do a lot of diligence on the way they go about procuring or contracting for these new industries to set the right price benchmarks. And the minister is very clear. He is saying that, this year he would like to discover those, and then he will straight away convert 500,000 to 1 million tons of hydrogen in refineries to green. So I think there will be a parallel growth in demand in situ hydrogen in India, and at the same time, there's another issue in Europe, which is of infrastructure. If you were replacing ammonia directly in the European ammonia industry, which is mainly consumed by fertilizers or chemical industries, and we have a partnership with BASF there, where those are mostly dependent on the CBAM mechanism, right? The carbon border adjustment, okay? But where you have to replace hydrogen, there's an infrastructure problem. You need a lot of pipelines, you need a lot of cracking technology to come in, which I think companies like Linde are developing today, right? And they'll all be ready by 28, 29. So slight delay, but there will be quite a good demand from 2029, 30 onwards. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed. Bharat, I wonder if I could bring you in on this same point about where the market is and where the offtake is going to be. The way Gautam's characterized it, perhaps there was irrational exuberance in Europe, but the growth in the market is still going to be there over time, perhaps just not quite as quickly as people expected, and it is still going to be a very important market. And meanwhile, there are kind of issues in India, in particular related to price, that may mean the market here grows more slowly. Is that how you see it? Do you still see those export markets, and Europe in particular, as being really crucial to the growth of the industry?
No, of course, if we look at geopolitics right now, I would put, okay, east of Asia, like Japan and Korea, there are few countries on the east side, but then Europe, these are few countries which are very still positive about green, because with the recent political changes, there are certain different thrust on green right now. But that will again depend how the political scenario changes in different countries in future. But yes, if we look at the positive side of it, Europe still seems to be a very robust market. But one thing which I would like to add here is the way right now we are looking at contracts is more like where green molecule producers are looking directly with the end user contracts. It's something which is actually adding complexity to the system. Because once the pricing mechanism is, and it is happening because pricing mechanism is not there. Once the pricing mechanism is there, I believe that big organizations, big energy organizations, which will be more into transportation of energy, just buying and selling. So those are the companies which are going to play a major role, which will kind of homogenize the global demand market. So they pick up molecules from X continent, sell in Y, not necessarily the X molecule going to a specific user. It would be more a transportation economics or logistics management organization by which picking up molecule from certain countries and delivering to nearby countries, even though contracts might happen in a longer cross-oceanic countries. I'm not sure if I made the point very clear, but I can elaborate on this point.
Yeah, I have to say, so I mean, give us an example of how that might work then, just to make that point clear.
So maybe I'm picking up this thing from the conventional energy transportation companies. So even if there are so many producers of oil or gas, but there are very few companies who basically do the transportation across the planet. So in similar fashion, if we look at the energy transportation in terms of ammonia, right now, India is a net importer of ammonia for certain, for gray ammonia. But on the other hand, we intend to sell green ammonia. Then the question comes back is how much are we losing this molecule in terms of transportation only? And is there a better way to look at the logistics by creating credits rather than actually transporting the A molecule to A consumer and B molecule to B consumer?
Oh, very interesting. That's a very interesting thought. Yeah, no, I see what you mean. Anil, maybe bring you in on this, again, the question of offtake and where the market is. In terms of customers you've lined up already and where you see potential growth in demand, what's the position for you?
I think I will just elaborate. My colleague was mentioning about something like swapping of the molecule, which can happen. We feel or we pray that it will happen next 5-year or 10-year time, like you are doing for LNG and LPG and all. So this swapping will certainly happen, but it may take little time because we are at the nascent stage. today if we talk about the green hydrogen real requirement or real users interest, it is very minuscule. So I hope, and I think industry hope that it will happen one day.
Thank you. So, John and Sébastien, I want to talk to you about the question of costs then. I mean, it seems like, as we've been saying here, the industry depends on demand, and demand in turn depends on price, and price then depends on cost. And I'm interested in your thoughts about how much more can be done to drive down cost and how much progress is achievable. I don't know, I mean, maybe Sébastien, do you want to talk first about that? I mean, what's your view on how much more can be done?
How much exactly it will be difficult today to say so, but I think everybody understood here in this attendance that the value chain of the green ammonia is very long and very complex. So the capex is one of this, and is one of the biggest, of course, and it starts with that. If you look at the legacy of the project, it's more what we used to name bespoke project. I think now, if we want to lower the capex, it's time to go to the standardization. And at least this is one path we decided to follow. And why standardization? Because the day you start thinking of that, you start thinking of optimization, based on massification, mutualization of the process and the equipment. And there are a lot of room. Of course, the customer needs to accept it, but I think now more and more willing to lower the capex, they are much more open mindset for that. So this is one key, so the standardization. Then you can work and develop as much as you want in terms of optimization alone. You will be blocked. So sooner or later you need to go one step further with the supply chain, and you need to enter in contact and develop relationship with your supply chain, with your supplier. Because if you want to lower and to develop competitiveness, you need to integrate them, how they can adjust specifically and standardize also by their own equipment to our plant. And that's why we develop and rely this product, plant as a product, Clear 100 Plus, based on 100 megawatt product. So, and the partnership you need to develop with the supply chain is not only with the equipment, it goes further, because in the CapEx you have a big portion dedicated to the constructions. So if you can integrate the construction company also in your product, they can challenge your design. And I think this is where we need to play with them. And it goes also with the third, I would say, partnership level, which is the molecular reaction licenses, which we need to integrate. We need to avoid to reinvent the wheel, to start from scratch. And when you do that, you shorten the delivery time, you decrease the engineering period, and then you bring lower capex to the customer. So the partnership is mandatory. You don't have the time to reinvent everything. Yeah. And then it goes to the people. Unfortunately, we don't have green hydrogen school yet, as far as I know. So we will need this market will need a lot of people, more and more experts in all infrastructure, in all equipment and the process. So I think the biggest contributors will be this one: standardization, partnership ability to be developed, and expertise with people.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's been a very consistent message that's been coming from many panelists. We've been hearing from is the importance of, as you say, the people, the skills, the expertise, the workforce, and developing that is a crucial thing. And yeah, that's certainly going to be very important to see progress in that, I think. John, I wanted to bring you on this. You were talking earlier about scale and the importance of scale and perhaps the difficulties of getting green hydrogen production to scale here. And is there a bit of a sort of a chicken and egg problem, is there not, in that to get costs down you need scale, and to get scale you need demand, and to get demand you need costs down, and there's a sort of, it can be a vicious cycle that's hard to break out of unless you kind of make that leap to scale. How do you see the issues, and what can be done, do you think, to actually make progress on driving costs down in the way they need to go?
Let it be clear that building a hydrogen value chain or an ammonia value chain around the globe will not happen overnight, right? And the chicken and the egg question related to supply and demand, of course, is there. And we see at the moment that there are still a few tenders coming up in Japan and in Korea, and many of the producers are competing around that offtake, which at the moment we see it's taken more as buying market share, more than that it's actually based on pricing at the moment. And that, that's of course the first movements in terms of offtake into the Asian market. But if you look into that value chain of ammonia and green ammonia, I already mentioned we're developing technology to backcrack ammonia back to hydrogen, and everybody thinks, oh, how much does that cost? What's the efficiency? And to get a robust working backcracking facility is for us very important. Efficiency you can talk about. I mean, process efficiency close to 90%. You lose some on the recycle and burning. Some ammonia, maybe that's in between 80 and 90%. And what is the right material to be used? So we're making the technology available, but this is not adding to the cost so much. I mean, production of green ammonia sits into the renewable power, into the electrolyzer, and into the transport. And if you then look at how much we can optimize the cost of an electrolyzer, knowing that 75% comes from the renewable power, 25% is the capex, and so let it be 30%. Out of that, the stack in itself, you use batch sourcing, and we use different suppliers, and we're testing. But if that's only 30% of the 30%, then you see it's already getting a small number, because the electrolyzer also has a water system, it has an electrical system, a gas separation system. And all that balance of plant actually loads much more to the cost than the stack itself. So low-cost standardization of stacks is an opportunity, but it's not groundbreaking. That in itself, of course, there's opportunities, and I fully agree here to my colleague that in terms of standardization, optimization, having a standard size, having a standard layout will help you to drive down cost further, which we will do and are doing. For me, the robustness in terms of scaling up electrolyzer capacity, making sure the intermittence question is answered. Also, an ammonia plant doesn't like to be turned up and down every day. So these are things we need to work around. I mean, in a discussion yesterday with my colleague here, we say, is it, how much can you turn an ammonia plant down? Is it down to 10% or 30%? And the different suppliers of ammonia technology with whom we're also working are claiming somewhere in that range. But that still means you cannot run the plant at full capacity if you go on the basis of green. And so there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of opportunity for us to work on, which we will do. I think in the meanwhile, long distance transport is still, there's time, right? We're making the technology available. We're also still working on the side of hydrogen liquefaction, because we say, maybe, in some markets like Australia, it's more liquid hydrogen, and we heard yesterday from Kawasaki that the cost, at least of the transport, is not so high. We see that actually the cost of producing green hydrogen and liquefying it is still slightly more expensive than ammonia as we see it today. But end of the day, you're comparing yourself to gray in the past, and that means coming from coal or coming from oil or coming from gas. If you compare that to the renewable mix, if this is now in the form of methanol or hydrogen or ammonia, I mean, that difference needs to get paid for. So very important is that, Asia talks about contract for difference, to pay for the difference in price. It's very important that this comes in place, because end of the day, we're not talking about the different energy factors. We're talking about a change towards decarbonization, reducing the CO2 footprint, which comes with a price. And that needs to get paid for. And there we see that local subsidies, so direct to end user supply, is a market which works at the moment. Direct funding, direct cost of CO2 allows you. The energy factors transporting around the globe, to my opinion, we still have time, right? And I think that's an opportunity where we all strive for, and that's, I guess, a competition, right, between India and the Middle East and US for the same token. And I think it's all hands on deck to make sure that we have the technology available, that you're ready with your renewable power cost coming down, and then Linde is happy to invest in your projects as we are doing today already.
Thank you. So question, how low can costs go? There's a lot of talk often in the industry about the holy grail of $1 per kilogram production cost for hydrogen. compared to, what is it, currently in India, maybe about $3 or $4, people are saying, significantly higher than that in the United States and in Europe as well. But as I say, I hear people talking about $3 or $4 here. $1 per kilo is kind of a nice round number, and it's a number that people seem to think would make the hydrogen value chain competitive and would be the thing that would kind of unlock much bigger demand for green ammonia and other derivatives. I mean, Ranjit, maybe come to you first on this. I mean, is that number plausible and is it significant? Do you think $1 per kilo is what the industry should be aiming for?
Well, I mean, as we have seen with the renewable energy industry, as the cost of renewable energy has dropped, new use cases have come out of the woodwork, right? I mean, we would have never thought 10 years back that we're going to use renewable energy to make hydrogen. That became possible only because renewable energy is, $2 cents a unit now. So it's the same thing with hydrogen, right? I mean, at the moment, hydrogen is in India, it may be $2.75, $3. And for India, specifically, once the hydrogen is down to $2, it'll open up the entire India market for conversion from green to grey. And there is a path to 2 very, very quickly. And the path from 2 to 1 is also visible. And I believe that over the next 5 to 10 years, we will be able to bring down the cost of hydrogen to $1. Though I think it will become very, very viable well before that.
Thank you. Gautam, what do you think about that?
No, so we spoke about this yesterday. I think first, for all countries where gas costs are $10 to $15, they don't need any. It's $2.50 of grey hydrogen today anyway, so there's no requirement to have a $1 hydrogen. But fundamentally, we have a problem with this $1 hydrogen. I don't think at $1 hydrogen, you effectively, if you understand the power business, which a lot of people in the molecule business didn't, I didn't also, you need power at $10 round the clock. So when you have round the clock $10 power, hydrogen is the last thing. You can electrify the whole world, right? Everything in the world will be electrified. You don't need, majority of the molecule business can disappear, right? So, no, we as a company, as a group, we don't believe in $1. I don't think the world needs $1. Power prices are increasing constantly, so you have a big power market as well there. I don't think it will come to $1. But I think as a good industry target, if you can get to that 2.5, which is itself tricky, there's a huge case for replacement in multiple industries. And with rising carbon costs, which are coming across in most countries today, it will automatically be viable for a massive replacement at that pricing levels. Yeah.
Thanks very much. So I see we're almost out of time. I just wondered if I could ask you all for kind of one thought to leave people with in terms of what you would see as a priority for realizing that potential of green ammonia, scaling up the industry. I don't know, Ranjit, if you want to go first, if there's one kind of takeaway you think that's really important for people to understand here, what would it be?
So my takeaway is just this, right? When people think about green hydrogen and green ammonia and the use cases for green hydrogen, green ammonia, please do not think of mobility and energy. Green hydrogen and green ammonia are both chemicals. They are currently used. That's the low-hanging fruit. We need to replace that as a chemical. They are part of energy transition in a larger sense. They are not energy at the moment. They are not there as yet, and we should not talk about it in the short term.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point, as you say. Really important for people to understand that. Gautam, what do you think?
I think more than what I think I would rather comment on what we're doing. I think the chicken and egg that a lot of you all have commented on, right? We're trying to break that. Building a big plant, we're building a 1 million ton plant with a firm belief that in a lot of these industries, scale creates demand as well, right? And a lot of oil and gas money needs to come into this, right? And oil and gas has an ability to accept risk. You drill an exploration well, you spend $100 million. It's fully equity funded, and you don't even know if you'll get a drop of oil out of it, right? Oil and gas can take that risk. If the ambient environment, which is policy, regulation, everything falls in place, oil and gas has that money, has that ability, and then that will create scale. I mean, we are backed by Petronas Gentari. We are thankful for that, so we are able to take that risk. I'm sure if more of oil and gas companies take that risk, that scale will come. With that scale, costs will go down and the demand will come. So that's how I view it. Yeah.
That's a great point, thank you. Yeah. Sébastien, what's your one takeaway you'd like to leave people with?
I think if we look at the environment, the environmental perspective, and we elevate a little bit the talks, I fully agree with what you just said before. We want to decarbonize, so we need to stay focused industry because this is where we have the biggest impact on the environment. If we are not convinced about that, we need to step out. So industry must be the top priority, and I think green ammonia is the most relevant for the moment right here. Of course, it depends up to the geography, but this is the priority.
Yeah. Thank you. John, a key message for people.
Cost of renewable power is an absolute differentiator for India. I mean, I look into business cases in Europe to put electrolyzer capacity on the ground, different scale, right? And then knowing that that cost of renewable power is so important for this green molecule, you have an opportunity to grasp. One word of caution is indeed scaling up electrolyzer capacity is still on its way. Turning them on and off, and also downstream the ammonia plant, is something where quality and robustness is very important for your business cases going forward, and that needs to be sorted out. So don't start too big, you know, do your testing. We do our testing in the lab in terms of turning things on and off and electrolyzers and everything. I mean, this remains very important for you to grasp the opportunity of green ammonia production.
Thank you. Bharat, your final thought.
Simple thinking that energy transition is inevitable, it has to happen, and we as technology company are very much focused to bridge those technological gaps as much as possible. On the top of that, it will become, it is already and it will become more and more important that people, if there are long-term contracts, large value contracts in terms of large quantity contracts, I mean to say large quantity and large period contracts, that is what is going to enable investment into those projects.
Okay, thank you. And Anil, last word to you.
I think I see a lot of optimism in this industry, which is at the nascent stage today, and we are not competing with oil and gas, which is established in industry, but we are supporting oil and gas or putting the alternate energy. There are various challenges. If you compare it 3 years ago and today, there are various innovations with respect to the reliability, quality, efficiency, and competitiveness in renewable energy, in electrolyzers, in battery storage, in hydrogen storage technology and techniques, and in the uses of the ammonia, green ammonia, or ammonia for power producers. People are working on engines, people are working on converting the conventional power plants. There are a lot of innovation is going on for the inland, waterland transportation, for the uses, direct uses of ammonia, so that you need not to convert it into fuel, hydrogen and others. So I see a lot of potential in this industry, and we have to wait and watch. Maybe next 3-4 years will be really good for this industry to grow in a multi-facet.
Excellent. Oh, well, excellent positive note for us to end on, but we do unfortunately have to leave it there. It's been a fantastic discussion. Thank you all very much indeed. Great talking to you. Thank you.